oh, I don't believe in toxic masculinity, and then point at someone and say that's not real masculinity and think that they're not one and the same. You're just being contradictory to yourself. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Art of Masculinity. I came across, obviously I do a lot of research for the show, but also on subjects that I think are going to be impactful for men. And one of the things I came across was, I love to dive into the criticisms that people have of some of the male content out there, from books to podcasts to other things. And one of the things that I saw, and I see this pretty often too, because you see it in comments, but people want to refer to real masculinity. And this is such a horseshit conversation to have for somebody to say what they believe real masculinity is, considering anything. Right. So whether it's the author, whether it's the personality, like, considering me on here, right? Like the personality or the author of the content, or whether it's the person criticizing, somebody has some version of that statement of that's not real masculinity. And I think that it's incredibly important for us to debunk this right off the bat, because real masculinity is not even a consistent nor clear statement. There is nothing that shows real masculinity. The definitions in and of themselves have no specificity other than male or acting in a masculine way. I'm paraphrasing, but that's literally what the two masculinity and masculine mean. That in and of itself has no clarity. It's very ambiguous. So when men, or even if you've said this statement before, if you want to go out there and say what real masculinity is, shut the fuck up. Because you don't know that, or you have a subjective concept of real masculinity. You don't know what real masculinity is, because at the end of the day, it's incredibly ambiguous to the male gender. It's a gender association. It's a term that we use for men, but there's no clear defining lines or attributes other than being a male. Right. So that's one thing we have to really just automatically debunk with this conversation. I don't like when people use that, because I personally don't believe that there is some consistent version of real quote unquote masculinity, mainly because all the research I've done, from the psychoanalytical side of things to the sociological side of things, there is no consistency cross-culturally. Now, I have talked about this in depth in the foundations of masculinity, and this is something that we really have to understand. If we continue to have verbiage like this, we're being subjective, ignorant dumbasses, and you're just showing how uneducated you are when you say a statement like that. Like, oh, this isn't real masculinity. Motherfucker, you don't know what real masculinity is, because you have a subjective version of masculinity that you're just trying to force on other people. There isn't a consistent theme of this. So just remember that if that's a statement you've said before, you've heard before, it's time to call that bullshit out, because it doesn't serve us moving forward, evolving as men. It doesn't serve us moving forward, just impacting the next generation and what they're going to experience and how they're going to deal with their own controversy in how they present themselves to the world and how the world views them as society evolves, right? We're dealing with this right now, but you're not helping the conversation. You're not helping the situation when you're saying, oh, this person's saying this, and that's not a real man, or that's not real masculinity. Bro, you don't know what real masculinity is. It's the black kettle pot, whatever that statement is, I forget. But at the end of the day, that is where this comes from. And when I see this comment coming on some of the books out there that, men have written. Now, whether or not I support those books is irrelevant. I just don't like very subjective terms classified with somebody else's work when they're not, I don't think, particularly trying to paint masculinity in a corner and say, here's the defining features. And then somebody's challenging that. That's not what the content typically is. What the content is typically an opinionated version of what they believe masculinity to be, or what they see around their own social circles or how they grew up. And then they write about that. And then somebody comes in and says, this isn't real masculinity. Now, the question I have to ask, though, is when somebody gets very defensive about this, and this is probably the bigger piece for me on top of it, is that when somebody's very defensive about what real masculinity is, I just from the work I've done on myself, I know that if that person asks them a question on why they had to make that comment, the prevailing theme and mindset behind it is probably going to be because they felt challenged in some way. They felt like they did not possess a certain feature in which this person was speaking about, and therefore they felt inferior to that comment or to this person's opinion. And in that becomes a challenge because at the end of the day, that is something that they need to look at internally as to where that violated their version of masculinity, maybe a piece they've never developed in their life. So they feel like they're being attacked. They've painted a picture as if they're being attacked and ultimately playing the victim in that conversation. That's important to note. Because when you are making those assumptions and you're going on the attack, you're defending a position within yourself that one, that person knows nothing about. And number two, you're defending a position within yourself that is insecure. You know, it's one that is challenged because it doesn't meet whatever that mark is. And maybe you have respect for that person and that's why you're challenging it. Maybe you value their opinion, or maybe they're just in a position of some form of authority on whatever subject. And because of that, you feel like if you can attack them and tear them down, people are going to think less of them. Dude, this is such a fucking toxic waste of fucking time for everybody. Because one is you're not going to tear them down and make yourself look smarter. And all of a sudden you're going to raise above their stature. That's not how that works. The other thing is that nobody's going to look at them any different because of your fucking comment. You know, everybody's going to look at them based on their own opinions and based on what they've read and how they associate with that, not because your fucking comment. Now, you know, the old saying of opinions are like assholes. Everybody has them. Just think about that when you're going to have some dumbass opinion about something, especially when it's incredibly subjective and then you just look like the asshole. But let's keep furthering that conversation is that you're not going to change other people to not like them because they see all of a sudden your comment and they're like, oh yeah, this fucking guy knows what he's talking about. That guy doesn't. I'm going to listen to this guy. And all of a sudden now I'm going to start like, you know, following him. No, that's not how that works. Right. Like they're going to see that shit and either bypass it, never read it, or they're just gonna be like, yeah, I kind of agree with that dude. Maybe I feel the same way about it. You're not changing anybody. Like, that's the point. You're not changing anybody. So just remember, like when you're coming from this, when you're presenting yourself from this opinionated position, you have to remember what you're actually doing to yourself. You're exposing yourself. And anybody that has been working in the self-development space or just working on improving who they are is going to see through your bullshit anyways. And the majority of them aren't going to all of a sudden jump ship on this person, or they're going to jump to your ship because they think you're better. They're not going to do that. So just remember that you're exposing your insecurities when you write this stuff out. You're defending your insecurities when you put this stuff out. And anybody with half a brain cell is going to be like, bro, you're really insecure. You're not working on your own shit. So you have these comments, you know, so you have these judgments. And that's part of the other piece that we need to look at is why are you even judging that person? Because I've seen these things and honestly, this isn't talking about me, by the way. I know how this could sound that it is, but it's not. I've just seen this comment with other people, and whether or not I value how they teach in any space, I just don't like the comment in general because just like toxic masculinity, it almost has no fucking place in our vocabulary, right? It has no fucking place in the conversation. It's an ignorant term, just like, you know, toxic masculinity and saying that's not real masculinity. Those things are both just as ignorant. Oh, I don't believe in toxic masculinity, and then point at someone and say that's not real masculinity and think that they're not one and the same. You're just being contradictory to yourself. So the only reason, like I said, I don't appreciate this is because the fact that I think it deteriorates the narrative of getting us to a better space as men. And it also deteriorates the narrative of men just trying to put out maybe some information that could help guide other people, right? Somebody might need to hear some of those things to be a stronger and better man in their life because they're struggling in one area or another. And some of those things may need to be heard by somebody who's really just in a deep, dark place who may associate with that person's story. So your dumb shit needs to fucking kind of stay with you. And then if that, you know, ask yourself why you're going to write that shit before you fucking write it too. And then do a little bit of self-inquiry and introspection on, hey, Why am I feeling that way? What is it in me that's feeling challenged? Why am I feeling that if I go and attack this person, it's going to somehow be valid, or it is going to validate me? What is it going to give my life? Like, what is it going to bring to me? Now, I will say this. If you're making a comment on something and it is so people get better information about that piece of content or the video or whatever, and you don't necessarily agree with it, I think that's okay. But using subjective statements like that's not real masculinity, to me, is not okay. Like that right there, again, shows that you are weak and you have something that you need to work on because your insecurity is being exposed. And the first thing I see when I see that is I look at maybe if they've elaborated on there, and then I just look at like how they say it, what they write with it. And that leads me to just believe that that person has an insecurity deep within them they have not come to terms with, and they haven't had the ability to address, or they haven't taken the time to address, let's say. So the last piece to this is the judgment piece. And for me, this is big because a lot of men really have bad judgment. I know this. I fucking carried this for so long. Shit, even today, I still have this sometimes, you know, my wife has to call me out on it. Like, why are you fucking judging people? You know, what's the point behind that? What is it in you that you're seeing in them that you're judging? Because that at the end of the day when we really get into this conversation, that at the end of the day is the real conversation. When you're judging other people, you're seeing something in yourself that you don't like, or you're seeing something that you used to do or would have done in the past that you don't appreciate or like, and you've moved past, right? But we're judging those people because of it. And that's the same thing. You get in these comments, this style of comments, and you're really just judging the other person. And for what reason, right? For what reason? It doesn't serve you. It doesn't serve them. And again, it just leads back to the questions that you need to have for yourself before you click the post button, or before you even put this down on a computer, on a Word document, or whatever, in a comment section on Instagram. Like, think about yourself first and what is challenging you. And then if it still feels like you need to put it out there to help other people understand something, maybe write it in a non-judgmental dickhead way. That's going to probably get through to people where it's a lot more objective than subjective. Now, that is just again, these are my opinions. So take them as you want them and leave them if you don't. Like, I don't give a shit. The whole point is to help create a better society where we're looking to improve one another and we're looking to help one another. Not everybody has the right answer. I mean, my book is going to be coming out this year. A lot of you guys will probably end up reading it, and not everybody's going to fucking like it. And guess what? I don't fucking care, because I do not associate with thinking the same exact way as everybody else. That's not who I am. That's not who anybody is. We all have opinions, just like we have assholes, and we all have different processing systems within our brains that have been developed through the life and experiences that we have, in which we then look through the lens on how we see the world and how we make decisions and how we view personalities and people in it. That is just a solid fact. So no, not everybody's going to like your content. Not everybody's going to agree with it. And there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat. Another saying, right? 1,000 ways to skin a cat. Not everybody sees the same way, and not everybody's way, just because it's different, necessarily means it's wrong, right? So these are things that we need to come up with before we start being judgmental little assholes, because of the fact that when we're that way, we're not improving the narrative around masculinity. When we're that way, we're not improving the lifestyle that the next generation of men receive. When we're this way, we're not improving anything in our mindset or perspective to live in a vibrational frequency of positivity and happiness. We're just living in this whole negative fucking structure that society loves, because it creates division and it creates anger against one another. And then unity is not able to be achieved.